Congestion pricing. It's finally here. I'm Nick Rafter, and welcome to Here's a Wild Thought. If you've been paying attention to the news recently in New York, you know that congestion pricing, the long-awaited plan to toll all drivers coming into Midtown and Lower Manhattan, has finally been introduced and implemented in New York. It passed back in 2019 and was supposed to be implemented in 2021, but there have been numerous delays, first because of COVID and more recently because of politics. And it finally started on Sunday with a $9 toll for any driver during peak period driving into Manhattan south of 61st Street. The toll is a little bit different overnight. It's about $2.50. Easy Pass people pay less. There's all that kind of stuff you can look up on the MTA website. But basically now, if you were to drive into Manhattan below 61st Street, you will be tolled. The toll is meant to raise revenue for the Metropolitan Transit Authority, or the MTA, the much hated agency that runs New York City's subways, buses, and the commuter rail lines, the Long Railroad and the Metro North. The toll is not popular. And if you've been paying attention to local news in New York City, you know it isn't popular with residents, nor is it popular with most of our local media. The New York Post has basically declared war on it. And even the local media outlets, the TV media outlets, have been sort of leaning towards being against it. New Jersey media is also very much against it because the toll hits New Jersey drivers who already pay a toll when coming through the Lincoln and Holland tunnels. And New Jersey has really taken steps to try to kill it unsuccessfully. If you follow me on social media, you know that I've been battling a lot of leftists in New York City who have firmly believed, almost to the level of delusion, that the congestion pricing will become popular over time as people begin to see the benefits of it, whether that's faster, better train service or less traffic in Manhattan. It's possible that they're right. I'm not going to completely dismiss the possibility that that'll happen, but I doubt it. Everything that they've done since 2019, when progressives first gained a level of power in Albany and in City Hall, everything they've done has become unpopular, especially stuff like criminal justice reform, their effort to change the standardized testing in city high schools, homelessness, COVID. All of these things have backfired on them, and they have not been able to sort of sustain a message to make their policies popular. I don't believe they're going to be able to do it with congestion pricing. Even if it does end up benefiting the city in the end, I don't know that people will see it. And one reason why I don't think people will see it is the media. The New York Post, as I said, is declared war on congestion pricing, and every single cover story they've done, almost every cover story they've done, since it was announced that January 5th would be the start of it, has been against congestion pricing. Most recently, they actually mocked a transit activist who supported congestion pricing because she was attacked on the subway. I have no doubts, and I have sources close to the New York Post who've said this, that they will continue to attack congestion pricing and the greater issue of progressive power in New York right up into the next gubernatorial election, where I suspect recently reelected Congressman Mike Lawler will run, promising to kill congestion pricing and roll back a bunch of other progressive ideas. Whether or not he'll win in the Trump midterm, I can't tell you. But I believe that the media will, at least the New York Post will, and probably some of the media outlets behind them, will continue to sort of bash congestion pricing up to that point, regardless of what happens with it. And so I do hope that progressives are ready for a full court press message war to try to really push the benefits of it if we do end up seeing benefits of it. Already this week, you've seen some congestion reduction in New York City. A lot of progressives have been tweeting about how less traffic is going through the Holland Tunnel and Lincoln Tunnel. There's less traffic in Manhattan. I've had some people tell me that there is a little bit less traffic in Manhattan. I think it's too early really to make any predictions on this. I think we're only 3 or 4 days in. You need more time. It is the first week of January. I think there's a lot of people who probably are working from home because the weather is so cold in New York. But I think if we start seeing this continue over the course of the next month, 2 months, 3 months, especially into the spring and summer, when more and more people are on the roads in New York, I think then you might see a trend that will really speak to at least some success in the congestion pricing scheme. However, I do hope that the left knows that the Post is going to oppose every argument that they make and counter it with some sort of, excuse the term, bullshit argument in order to keep driving home the point that this is bad for the city. The reason why I really want to warn leftists on this is that you're coming into this policy with a lot of people who not only oppose congestion pricing, but they want it to fail. Right? And this is the thing that I think progressives don't really understand about public opinion. New Yorkers largely not only oppose congestion pricing, they don't want it to succeed. There are some who do. I think there's people who oppose it who, really don't care whether it succeeds or not and really kind of is hoping for the best. But a lot of the opposition wants it to fail and needs it to fail. And those are the people who are going to feed into all the New York Post stories. And so you need to really be aware of that and really drive home your points and try to at least undermine the New York Post and other media outlets and their credibility when arguing this stuff. I have a friend of mine from grade school who actually owns a store in Chelsea in Manhattan. I wasn't aware she owned the store. She just recently told me. And she's fairly conservative, and she was not very pro-congestion pricing. She posted on her social media that she was sick and tired of people calling her, and later she confirmed that it was actually reporters who were calling her, to ask her if she was closing the store because of congestion pricing. And she wanted to make it clear that there's no intention to close her store because of congestion pricing. She had a pretty great holiday season, and she's doing okay. And she also pointed out that 99.9% of her customers either live in the city or they travel to her store, which is right near the 1 train, by subway. And so she doesn't have a lot of customers who drive into Manhattan and then frequent her store. She does have a few. There are people who come to her store who are driven in from New Jersey, especially for a weekend shopping trip or something. But they're very few and far between, and they're likely customers who don't come very often. And if they do, they'll come on the train or they'll buy online. There's other options for her to succeed. So she's not concerned about how it would hurt her business. And further, what she told me was that the veracity in which a lot of these reporters are coming to her store and trying to get her to say that congestion pricing is going to hurt her has sort of made her rethink her opinion against it. And she really sort of agreed with me in that there is sort of a media bias against congestion pricing, and that maybe she needs to sort of revisit her opinion on it because maybe it's being influenced by what she sees in the media, which I think is an interesting dynamic. In my own experience with media, I can sort of see what's going on here. I was a reporter for many years for the Queens Tribune and the Queens Chronicle out in Queens, as most of you probably were aware. And while transportation wasn't my beat, I did cover a lot of transit issues under the Bloomberg and de Blasio administrations. And one of the big things that I covered was the implementation of bus lanes on Woodhaven and Cross Bay Boulevard, which is a major north-south thoroughfare through central and southern Queens. The decision to put bus lanes on the boulevard actually started under Mike Bloomberg, when the former councilman who represented my district, Eric Ulrich, when he first took office back in 2009, he actually told me in a private off-the-record conversation that the bus lanes on the boulevard were one of his priorities for his time in office. The bus lanes were kind of kicked down the road for many years. There was strong public opposition all up and down the boulevard to them. One of the fears was that the bus lanes would take away a lane of traffic and cause more traffic on the boulevard. That was a widely held fear. The boulevard's heavily trafficked by cars. It's the only route in Queens, other than the land route in Far Rockaway, into the Rockaways. It's a major thoroughfare going towards JFK Airport. It connects a bunch of many transit-starved neighborhoods along the route, Howard Beach and Glendale and Rego Park, at least on the other side of Queens Boulevard, that aren't very close to subways. And so it's a heavily car-trafficked route. There are bus routes, and I'm personally familiar with them because I took the Q11 bus up and down Woodhaven Boulevard every day to go to high school. And I remember how long it took me to get to high school on the bus before there were bus lanes and before we had limited bus service. The plan that the MTA and the DOT wanted to do back under the Mike Bloomberg administration, going back 15 years ago, was to build bus lanes on the boulevard and then change some of the bus routes so that there were limited buses that stopped only a few stops, and then there were local buses that stopped at all of them, and it would speed up bus service on the boulevard. The Q52 bus, which was back when I was in high school, was a limited bus that ran from Queens Center Mall directly through the Rockaways, with no stops in between. It was recreated as a limited bus stop that made certain stops along the route, and the Q11, which was my old bus, kept its local service. The bus lanes were finally built around 2014-2015 in the de Blasio administration. Now, if you know New York politics, you know that when Bloomberg handed over the city to de Blasio, a lot of the politics in the outer boroughs completely shifted. There were a lot of neighborhoods, especially the ones up and down Woodhaven Boulevard, and if you look at this map, you'll see how they voted in the last election, so you know what kind of neighborhood they are. A lot of these neighborhoods supported Mike Bloomberg when he was mayor, but did not like Bill de Blasio because he was a progressive candidate. They didn't like him especially because of his opinion on policing. And so they didn't trust him. And so a lot of these neighborhoods that were mildly opposed, but not terribly opposed to the bus lane under Bloomberg, became rabidly against it when Bill de Blasio took office. They saw it as an attack on their community. One person told me that it was an effort to move minorities into their community, poor people, because that's who took the bus. And the community boards were very much against it. And it turned into this long, years-long battle with the de Blasio administration where a lot of bad faith stuff went on. Community Board 9, which was a community board that covered the neighborhoods of Woodhaven, Kew Gardens, Richmond Hill, and Ozone Park, actually asked DOT to change their plan for the bus routes. Woodhaven Boulevard in that part of Queens is actually what's called a limited access highway, where there are 2 lanes on the service road and then 3 lanes in the middle of the boulevard with medians between them and a center median in the middle. The community board actually asked DOT to change their plans to move the bus stops from the side of the road into the medians so that it wouldn't take away parking. The argument here, though, was that by doing this, they would be able to build a better argument against the bus lanes by saying putting the stops on the medians was going to be more dangerous because cars go faster in the middle lanes. So they were hoping that by moving the bus stops to the medians, they could create a stronger argument against it. So it was all in bad faith. And DOT knew this and did it anyway because in the end it was actually a smarter decision. The bus stops are on the medians today, and they work out pretty well. So this sort of was an interesting experience for me to watch this and watch a community fight against these transit improvements, because I drove Woodhaven Boulevard every day. I still do. I drove Woodhaven Boulevard today, and I've been driving on Woodhaven Boulevard since I learned how to drive when I was 18 in 2001. So I know the boulevard very well. I know its intricacies. I know its traffic patterns, and so I knew that some of the changes they wanted to make was actually going to improve the boulevard. At one point, at Union Turnpike going northbound, there was this bottleneck that always existed because of the stages in which the boulevard was built 80 years ago. The DOT's plan to put the bus lanes would have eliminated that bottleneck, and it did, and it got rid of that traffic jam, that bottleneck that happened every day. It did create some other bottlenecks in other parts of the boulevard, but generally speaking, in my opinion, and I was driving the boulevard every day when it happened, it made it easier to drive up and down the boulevard. At the time that the bus lanes were implemented back in 2014, I believe it was, I was working at the Queens Chronicle, where the office was on Woodhaven Boulevard, right near the end of the strip by Queens Center Mall. So I would drive almost the whole length of Woodhaven Boulevard every morning and afternoon to go to and from work. So I was aware of how long it took me to get to work. Before the bus lanes, it took me about 12 minutes to get from my house to the office and about 18 minutes to get home. After the bus lanes were implemented, it took me 9 minutes to get to the office and about 20 minutes to get home, a little bit longer to come home. So in the end, it actually worked out better. But everyone else who took the same route that I did told me that it was worse. And they ensured me that it was worse. I worked with a woman who lived not far from where I did and did almost the same commute. It was maybe about 5 minutes further. And she would tell me that it took her an hour and a half to get home, when I was very aware that it only took her about 20-25 minutes. But she was insistent that the bus lanes have made her life a living hell. And so was everyone else who opposed them. The community boards had huge fights over this. There was one woman on the community board who actually testified, member of the community board, who testified that she didn't support the bus lanes because she had some sort of condition that didn't allow her to go out and take a bus. She needed to drive. And so this was actually hurting her. It was an ableist thing to do to make these bus lanes because she was disabled and couldn't take a bus. They found every excuse in the book to oppose it. And the thing was, the media, us, we also opposed it. My newspaper had multiple opinions and op-eds against the bus lane. I did a story. I was assigned a story by my editor based on a letter to the editor that we got from a woman who lived in Broad Channel, which was a small island between mainland Queens and the Rockaways, where she explained that she took a bus to Ozone Park every day and walked to church to say her novenas. And the bus, because of the bus lane's implementation, her bus stop was removed because it was too close to another bus stop. And so she now had to walk an extra block to get to the church. And she, wrote this very sad letter where she says, I guess I can't go say my novenas anymore because the city doesn't care about this poor old lady. My editor was like, you have to write a story about this. You have to go down and interview her, take a picture of her, standing where the bus stop was, maybe make her look sad. And I said to him, this is not really a problem. she can just get off the stop before, which still exists, and walk an extra block. It's only 700 feet. It's not like she has to go miles away, right? But she insisted, and I did the story, and I took the sad photo, and I wrote the big article about how, she can't say her novenas anymore, even though there's like 4 churches closer that she could have gone to. And it was on the cover of the newspaper. It really sort of propagandized this idea that the city, in implementing these bus lanes and by making bus service more efficient, they were doing something that was hurting people instead of helping people. And it sort of really also woke me up to the whole concept of, what is progress, what is policy, and how you can't really make everyone happy. On the greater scheme of things, the bus lanes on Woodhaven Boulevard are a resounding success. The buses are, we're 10 years into this now. The buses are faster. They're more heavily used. The express buses to the city are faster. There hasn't been a lot of issues with accidents and stuff. Everything has been better, I think. My opinion is that it's been much better. It hasn't been a disaster that everyone thinks it is. But if I say that, I'm going to get a lot of people probably watching this who are going to say to me, Nick, it's much worse, and here's 100 reasons why. I am sure there's a handful of people who look at this and say, this was an attack on me. And this is sort of the thing about policy, is that you can't please everybody. And you really have to understand that when you're enacting this type of progressive policy, you are screwing some people, and you have to be assured that you're doing this for the greater good, where more people will be helped than hurt by this policy. But understand the people who are going to be hurt, they need to have a voice too, and they need to be at least treated with some level of respect, even if you don't agree with what they're saying. There's no reason why that old lady couldn't have taken an incessant ride to the church. There's no reason. She even had a car she could have drove. There's no reason why she couldn't go to the church down the block from her house in Broad Channel. She did not have to go to this specific church. But these are all things that when you say it, you sound like an asshole. When I said it to my editor, he thought I was an asshole for saying it. And he was like, when you get old, you'll understand how it feels, and blah, 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 and everything else. And I kind of get that now. I guess I was 31 at the time when this happened, so I was still relatively young. But this is kind of how a lot of congestion pricing supporters have talked about congestion pricing to the people who are angry about it. There are a lot of people who are angry about congestion pricing who, frankly, should just get over it. If we're being honest, they're angry about it for really dumb reasons. A lot of focus on congestion pricing are on the people who drive into Manhattan on a regular basis to go to work. There are very few people who do that. And the ones who do are like my dad's friend who drove from Manhasset every day because he thought he was too good to take the train. There's no working class people who drive into the city. There are people who are plumbers and they do that kind of work. Fine, like I can understand an argument for those people, and they'll have to probably raise their prices. That's something for Manhattan people to deal with. Quite frankly, if you live in Manhattan below 61st Street, you probably can afford the upcharge that a lot of these workers are going to charge in order to get into Manhattan to do your work. So I'm not worried about that pretty much. There's really few working class people who live in Manhattan below 61st Street. And those who do mainly live in housing projects where the city has to take care of that anyway. The people who drive into the city every day are either rich or they do it leisurely. The people that I think progressives need to worry about are the people who drive into Manhattan for leisure. And the people I'm talking about here are the upper middle class or middle class people who take the trains, subways, and buses to work every day. But when they get home from work on a Friday night, they want to get dressed, get in their car, and drive to the city to go and hang out at the club, or to go and hang out and have dinner with their friends, because they don't want to take the train again. They've been taking the train 5 days a week, and they're coming home late, and they don't want to be on the train late for obvious reasons, and so they want to drive in. There are a lot of people like that in the city, and nobody's thinking of those people because A, you think they're ridiculous, and B, we don't see them, right? We see the people who drive to work, the people who take the subway. We don't understand how many people take the subway or take the bus, and then they drive into Manhattan for other reasons. And this was sort of my life growing up, is that, my family would very often drive into Manhattan for leisure activities, Broadway shows, dinners, that kind of thing. But they also took the subway to work every day. And driving into Manhattan was sort of that treat you get at the end of the hard work week when you don't have to get back on the subway again, you don't have to deal with the delays again, you have to deal with the people on the subway again. You can now drive in, pay to park, and enjoy your night. And those are the people who are going to be most opposed to congestion pricing. And these are people that should be and used to be part of the Democratic coalition. Among these people are going to be younger people of color, Hispanic, some black, many Asians, 20s, who live in the outer boroughs and they have a car and they only use it on the weekends and they only use it to drive into Manhattan to go, to dinner or to a club or to an event. And they're the ones who are going to be pissed off by this. And they're the ones who are going to be propagandized by the New York Post and Republicans. And they're the ones who are, in the last few elections, swinging Republican. Back in 2022, one of the reasons why Lee Zeldin did so well in the governor's race is that he would show up in the South Bronx at the scene of a crime and tell these people who live in the South Bronx, who were largely black and Hispanic, that he hears them on crime. And Kathy Hochul does not, and the Democrats do not. And for the first time, a lot of these people said, oh wow, there is another option for us. The Republicans will listen to us. And they voted for him. And Trump did the same thing, and other Republicans did the same thing. You will see Mike Lawler going to places like Parkchester, Flatbush, and Flushing, and Jackson Heights, and Corona, and all of these parts of the city, Jamaica, and saying to them, the Democrats don't care about you. They're fine with you paying $9 to go have dinner at your favorite restaurant after you worked hard all week, because they think that you should get back on the subway. You should get back on that train that has aggravated you for 5 days. You're too rich, you're too elitist to be allowed to drive into the city. And that kind of message will work. And it will definitely work, and it's definitely something that progressives are not considering, and they don't want to even engage in it. They don't care that people feel that way. They don't want to know about it. They want to believe that they have this perfect, multicultural, working class coalition of New Yorkers who support, climate change policies and environmental policies, who agree that we need to do something about subways and buses and not worry about the people who drive. They want to believe that everyone who drives to the city is sort of a rich billionaire white Wall Street person, and that we're really taking them on in favor of the working people in these outer borough neighborhoods or Manhattan neighborhoods. And they're wrong about that. And I don't know how much longer they have to go before they realize how wrong they are about that. And the media, the New York Post and other media outlets, are going to really drive that point home in a level that I don't think people are prepared for. And that's where my concern is for the next 2 to 4 years. And that's where I think we need to be looking at. Watch how the media handles congestion pricing. Watch where it goes. When the Woodhaven Boulevard bus lanes were implemented, the media made it issues of it very quickly. CBS 2 sent their helicopter to Woodhaven Boulevard to take aerial photos of the traffic, to sort of blame the bus lanes for the traffic. Now, I know exactly where on Woodhaven Boulevard this picture is, and there has always been traffic there, even before the bus lanes. But CBS 2's reporters didn't, and they went right there to take pictures of it. I guarantee you that there were civic leaders in Queens who were on the phone with CBS's newsroom and saying, send a helicopter to Woodhaven Boulevard and check out this traffic. They knew that traffic was always there, but they thought they could spin the propaganda against it. And that's what they're going to do with congestion pricing. Every traffic jam in the city is going to be seen as a reason why this is failing. Every time the subway goes down, it's going to be seen as a reason why it's failing. Every subway crime is going to be blown up to epic proportions. Homeless people, you're going to see videos all over the internet of homeless and mentally ill people causing all kinds of ruckus on the subways, with commentary about how New York progressives think that we should endure this. And you're going to see people, who have stores in Manhattan who are going to close, who are going to say it's congestion pricing, even if it's not congestion pricing. I'll tell one more story about that. When bike lanes were installed on Queens Boulevard, which was a whole other thing that happened under my time as a reporter, several delis on Queens Boulevard actually closed their doors and blamed the bike lanes for closing because it took away parking spots. The deli owners admitted off the record to reporters they talked to, me as well, that wasn't the reason why they were closing anyway. But they thought by blaming the bike lanes, they might be able to influence people to vote for somebody who would rip them up. That's what's going to happen in the next few years. And I hope that progressives are ready for that, and I hope that congestion pricing supporters are ready for that, because it's unlikely, I think, that the MTA and the Democrats in government will help them out here. I expect that in the next few years you're going to hear from the MTA. They're going to demand more money. They're going to raise fares. And the question is going to be asked, what happened to the congestion pricing money? When that happens, it's going to hurt the policy. And so I hope that progressives are just ready with a full court press to defend this, because I think that there is less of a chance now that Trump is president, but a real chance that a Governor Mike Lawler gets elected in 2026, and all of these things go away in 2027. Thanks for listening. Stay tuned for more. If you want to check out other good things that are going on this week, check the links down below for a few articles and podcasts that I think you should probably listen to about other political ideas. My former colleague Ross Barkin has a great story about the New York Post that sort of echoes what I wrote last spring. Does it, I think, in a little bit better language, and it's worth checking out. Check out my friend Daruni, who was on a podcast last week talking about the Democratic Party and issues with men. And keep listening and keep reading, and don't forget to like and subscribe.